Shabbat Shalom. The story is told on a particular Sunday morning. The maintenance department of a synagogue went through and changed all of the locks on the cabinets in the religious school classrooms. And so sure enough, this particular Sunday morning, the religious school teacher comes in and she's trying to open the lock to her cabinet, this combination lock, and she just couldn't get it. So flustered, she walks around and she comes over, and there's the elderly rabbi sitting in his office. And she says, "Rabbi, I hate to bother you, but I could really use some help. Would you mind? I can't get the new combination lock to my cabinet open." The rabbi says, "No problem." And sure enough, he walks down to the religious school wing and he comes up to the cabinet in the religious school classroom. And he picks up the combination lock in his hand like this, and he looks at it for a second. And then he looks heavenly, mumbles a word or two inaudibly, comes down, turns the combination a little bit. Again, he looks toward the sky, mumbles a slight word with his mouth, again turns the combination. And again, one more time, slightly longer, he looks up at the ceiling, brings his head down, turns the combination, opens it up. Now, the religious school teacher is amazed. She says, "Oh my gosh, look at the connection this rabbi has to God. Even God speaks to him and tells him the combination lock." And so she says to the rabbi, "You are such a holy man, so holy, holy. Thank you so much for opening up my cabinet for me." And the rabbi said, "Don't get so excited. We taped the lock combination to the ceiling." What is holiness? And what is holiness in the 21st century? That's what we're challenged by our Torah portion this morning. What does it mean to be holy? Now, elsewhere in our Torah portion, it tells us not to go about and behave like the Egyptians and the Canaanites. And at other points in our Torah portion, it tells us how we are to treat the Kohanim, the high priests, and how they are to behave. But the heart of our Torah portion is really Leviticus chapter 19, what is often known as the Holiness Code. And if you remember back to the book of Exodus, it tells us in Exodus that God says to us that we're supposed to be a mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. We're supposed to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And God puts us on hold just a little bit. And here in this week's Torah portion, this double Torah portion of Acharei Mot-K'doshim, God comes to answer that question. So I'll invite you, please, if you'll turn with me in your Eitz Chaim Chumashim. I'm on page 693. Page 693 in the Eitz Chaim Chumashim. And again, just as God tells us to be a Goy Kadosh, to be a holy nation, here we are in 693, Leviticus chapter 19. V'daber Hashem el Moshe lemor, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, speak to the entire Israelite community, v'amarta aleihem, and say to them, K'doshim tiyu ki kadosh ani, you shall be holy, each one of you, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Now, it's not just a generalized statement that we're left to try to figure out what exactly does God want from us, what do we need to do in order to be holy. If you'll turn with me, please, to the next page, we start to get the results. You shall each revere his mother and his father, Moses tells us. Now, that's not just code for being nice to our parents, though kids who are here, that is something we have to do. We have to be nice and listen to every single word that they say. But our rabbis, they come to interpret revere your mother and father as when they come into the room, you're obligated to stand up and honor them by standing up when they come in the room. Could you imagine your kids doing that? Another way that we revere our parents is by making sure when they're old they have enough food to eat. They have shelter, they have water. It's an adult child's obligation to care for his or her parents when they get older. Torah doesn't say you have to love them. Torah doesn't even say you have to like them. But you have to revere them. One of the ways we show reverence is by caring for our parents as they age. The Torah keeps going, and keep my Shabbases, I'm the Lord your God. I'm banking on this one as the mitzvah that's going to transform conservative Judaism in the coming years and in the coming century. Because as conservative Jews, we still stand by this notion that you have to observe Shabbat. Now imagine how revolutionary that thought is in 2018, when a rabbi would stand before a congregation and say to you, it is an obligation to turn off your stinking cell phones. You have to disconnect from technology. If you want to start for 1 hour at Friday night dinner, start with 1 hour. Turn off the cell phone, turn off the computer, turn off the television, turn off the PlayStation, turn off satellite radio, turn it all off. And whether it's 1 hour at Friday night dinner or whether it's what the tradition says, which is 25 hours for Shabbos, be with each other. Be with your family. Spend time together. Connect with each other. Go see friends. Come to shul. Take a nap. Be with your community. Celebrate life. Whether you start with 1 hour at Friday night dinner, whether it's one evening just Friday night, or whether it's the entire 25 hours of Shabbat. What does it mean to be holy? It means to disconnect from all the technology and be present in the moment. Live life with joy, with mindfulness, and spend time with those you love the most. What else does it mean to be holy? Do not turn to idols or make molten gods for yourselves. I, the Lord, am your God. Have faith. To be holy means to have faith. And in this world where fewer and fewer people have faith and have faith in the one God, it's talking to us. Join a shul. Be part of the community. Come to services. When you sacrifice an offering of well-being to the Lord, sacrifice it so that it may be accepted on your behalf. It shall be eaten on the day you sacrifice it or on the day following, but what is left by the third day must be consumed in fire. Seems totally irrelevant to us. What could this possibly have to do with us and this idea of everyday holiness, of 21st century holiness? I'll call your attention to the commentary at the bottom of the page. The command to consume the shleimim, this offering of well-being, within 2 days is meant to encourage the donor to invite the poor to share in a meal. This obligation is about inviting the poor to share in your meal. How often do we really reach out and really dig deep to care for those who are in need? And not just by sharing our food with them, but the Torah keeps going. And here I am on verse 9. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard bare or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I, the Lord, am your God. Imagine that. Our rabbis come to interpret this in our own days when few of us sitting in the room are farmers. It's that we have an obligation to give 10% of our earnings to tzedakah. Doesn't matter if maybe you're saving for a boat, or maybe you're saving for that dream house down the road. It doesn't matter whether you've got your eyes set on a little earlier retirement than otherwise. 10% to tzedakah. That's digging deep. And it doesn't matter whether you want to or maybe you don't feel like it. It's an obligation, a mitzvah, to give tzedakah. And what we even come to learn in the midst of holiness is that this is not something that just the Kohanim are obligated to do. This is not something that just the holiest of holy people are required to do. This is for all of us. Each one of us are meant to dig deep, to give to those who are in need, to provide for our Jewish organizations, to make sure our synagogue has light and heat. We have an obligation to care for our community and for all those who are in need. The Torah keeps going, you shall not steal, you shall not deal deceitfully or falsely with one another. You shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of your God. I am the Lord. This is code. The Torah tells us in 3 different ways about this idea of stealing, one of them being in the 10 Commandments and 2 here. Our rabbis come to teach that this is a prohibition against kidnapping, prohibition against stealing money, a prohibition against taking things. Even if you can get away with it. Think how revolutionary this idea is. Even if you can get away with it because you're that good. Our Torah reminds us that God is watching. That there is a higher judge with a capital J. You're not getting away with it. And so even if you could do it in secret, even if you think no one else is watching, remember that there is one who is watching. You shall not defraud your fellow. You shall not commit robbery. The wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning. The Torah says you have to pay your employees on time. You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord. That verse 14 speaks in so many ways for itself. You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. I'm reminded that I was once doing an adult education opportunity, and I'd retype some of these commandments about holiness. I was probably moving a little fast because as we were going through and doing our learning, it said, you shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. Different. We have to care for those who are in need. We have to reach out to those who are disabled. We have to help our fellow man and woman. Our Torah this week in Parashat K'doshim comes to speak to this idea of holiness. We have to transcend what everyone else is doing. It tells us kadosh, to be different, to be unique, to be separate. The word kadosh itself, we translate it as holy, but really means to be separate. And so that's why elsewhere it says, don't go about like everybody else. Think about what other people might do. Think about what the rest of the world might do in this particular situation, and you are obligated to do differently. When the rest of the world might turn their back on someone who's in need, you're obligated to open your eyes, your hearts, and your hands to them. When the rest of the world starts to leave its faith, you're obligated to turn that much closer to your faith. When the rest of the world makes one choice, the Jews are obligated to be countercultural. We don't have to be the holiest of holies. We don't have to be the Kohanim. But we can't be like everybody else either. I'm reminded of a story by one of our favorite teachers. He's got wonderful books out there. His name is Rabbi Lawrence Kellerman. And he's an Orthodox rabbi living in Israel with many, many kids, which, by the way, is also different than everybody else. We Jews need to have more kids. We liberal Jews need to have more kids. Well, Rabbi Lawrence Kellerman is living in Israel with his children, and he says his sixth child comes into the world, and they're looking at this beautiful baby, and they decide to name him Hillel Yeshayahu. Now, that doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Hillel Yeshayahu. But the rabbi says when his wife looked down at this beautiful new baby, their sixth child, she says, this one is such a kadosh. This one is such a holy child. The name stuck. The name Kadosh stuck. That became the little child's nickname. And sure enough, for several years, that's what he heard himself referred to at the dinner table, in the family room, out at the park. The child was called Kadosh, the Holy One. So Rabbi Kellerman tells a story that sure enough, one day he and his wife decide it's time to take a vacation. They live in Jerusalem and they want to head up to Netanya, which is really only about an hour, hour and a half bus ride away. So sure enough, it comes time to get all of their kids ready to go to the bus station. So what do parents tell their kids before they get in the car to go on a long trip? Use the restroom. So sure enough, they get all the kids in and out of the restroom. 6 kids, 7 kids, they're shaking them up and down, trying to get them ready, trying to get everything out. And they get in the car and they drive to the bus station. And of course, while Rabbi Kellerman is buying tickets for the direct bus, so they don't have to stop every 15 minutes, tickets for the direct bus from Jerusalem to Netanya to make it the fastest trip it can be. What is Mrs. Kellerman doing? She takes all the kids to the bathroom again. Puts them in there, shakes them around, tries to get everything out. So now they finally load onto the direct bus from Jerusalem to Netanya. They sit back and get comfortable. They know the trip will be about an hour and a half long. Of course, 10 minutes into the trip, little Kadosh looks up to his father. Daddy, I have to use the bathroom. Oh my gosh, didn't we just go 10 minutes ago? Everybody went, everyone went before. I didn't have to go then. How much longer until we get to Netanya? The rabbi looks at his watch, and it's at least an hour. And he's starting to panic now. And he says, you can hold it. Well, sure enough, a couple minutes go by, and the little boy, the Kadosh, looks up to his daddy and says, are we almost there, Daddy? Rabbi Kellerman looks at his watch. That bead of sweat starts to drip down his forehead. He says, oh yeah, we're almost there. We've all committed that lie, let's be honest. And so sure enough, time passes, minutes pass, and you start to see little Kadosh curling more and more into a pretzel as he tries to hold it together. And sure enough, the trip goes on, and they're driving down the road, and they're nearing Netanya, and more Kadosh is turning into that pretzel, just with every ounce of his being, trying to keep it together. Just then, they finally arrive at Netanya, and all of the other Kelman children, they stand up and they block the aisles so that little Kadosh and his parents can rush off the bus. And sure enough, they all rush off the bus, and they rush right into the bus station in Netanya, and they rush right to the bathroom, and they think, we're saved, we've made it, we're here, everything's going to be okay. And baby Kadosh is running all tied up as a pretzel, trying to get there in time. And they get to the bathroom, and guess what? It's closed. It was closed. So Rabbi Kelman tells a story. Now they're panicking. Now the pretzel is starting to stick, and they're really getting close, and they're getting very nervous. And they're running down the street, and Rabbi Kelman has sent the older children ahead, and they're running in and out of storefronts, trying to find a public bathroom for this little Kadosh, this little boy, to be able to use. When finally one of the older children runs into a bar, and he comes out, and he's jumping up and down. He says, they'll let us use the bathroom, they'll let us use the bathroom. And as they're getting close, Kadosh hears, we're going to go into the bar for a bathroom. And he stops real quick, and he says, Abba, what's a bar? Little kid didn't know what a bar was. So, of course, his older brother takes the opportunity to explain to the child what a bar is and what exactly goes on inside a bar. And Rabbi Kelman and his wife are relieved because finally they're able to go to the bathroom, and they're standing outside the bar. And they say, okay, Kadosh, go ahead, go inside. And little Kadosh, who's a full pretzel now at this point, he looks up at his parents and he says, I can't go in there. And the parents are freaking out. What do you mean? We've wasted all this time. We're trying to get you. We finally have an opportunity. This is your chance to go. Just go inside. And little Kadosh says, I can't go in there. And they say, what do you mean you can't go in there? Why can't you go in there? And the little boy says, because I'm Kadosh. Because I'm the Holy One. And I don't belong in a bar. Imagine that. Imagine if we imbued each of our children with this sense that they are Kadosh, that they're holy. Imagine if each of us took upon that label for ourselves and called ourselves Kadosh, holy. It means that each and every day we have to think about the choices that we're making. We don't have to be the holiest of holies. We don't have to be the high priest. But we can't be just like everybody else either. And so in a day and an age where anger, where meanness, where hatred, where defensiveness is such a part of our everyday culture, maybe part of being holy today means striving that much more to be kind. In a day and an age when people are leaving their faith and leaving religion, maybe we have to strive that much harder to be part of our communities, to sustain our communities, to come to shul, to enjoy each other's company, and to celebrate life using the Jewish rituals that God and the Torah and the rabbis have given us. Maybe it means that each and every day we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be holy in the 21st century? And how can I achieve that? On this Shabbat of Parashat Acharei Mot-K'doshim, may we take to heart the commandment of our Torah portion this week, K'doshim to you ki kadosh ani. You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. K'nei Yiratzon, may this be God's will, and let us say together, Amen.